Manhattan a little bit and what you thought of your defense's performance.
Yeah, it's obviously frustrating anytime you don't get the outcome that you prepare for, you work for, and at some points you felt like over the course of the game you're kind of earning or building towards that, and then for a long stretch of the game, specifically middle eight, as you surround halftime and extended, just really disappointed in how we performed, and so you take ownership in that. And then at some point, towards the end of the third quarter, there was a fight that showed, and I'll say kind of showed back up, which that's the alarming part, right? And part of the messaging to the guys was that fight was available to us sooner, and why we maybe lost it in some of those what ended up being critical moments is something that from a coaching standpoint you got to look at, and obviously from a player standpoint you got to do the same, but fought to the end, which is a big deal, and if you're not careful, you completely dismiss it because you lost, and you just focus on the negative, and there's plenty of negative to go around. But next time around, you fight and you find yourself in a one-score game, and maybe you get a takeaway there, and there's an alternate reality that we'll never know about because we didn't play good enough football, but the fight matters. So disappointing, obviously a lot of credit to, I know K-State's a good football team that wasn't playing very well, and we allowed them to play well, and they did just that.
Alex, how concerning was the run game, the run defense for you guys? I mean, Dylan Edwards was able to get some big runs and things like that, and they were able to kind of to get some big yards on that. How concerning was that for you guys?
Well, it is a concern, and it's one game, and you got a limit to that, and you can come up with all the checkers that can be, should have been in place, and in some cases were in place, and we just didn't make the play, and that's reality, and credit goes to again to the opponent. But you can't dismiss that. You also can't go, well, if A, B, C, D, and E would have happened, we would have stopped them. That's called making excuses in a very kind of clever way. And then the yards are the yards, and the plays happen, and so you got to learn from them, and you got to look at through the lens of, is there something we can do structurally to help the guys? If you got an edge run, okay, how do we keep an edge? And we've done a pretty good job of that for the bulk of the season, but it only takes a couple, especially in third and shorts or fourth and two, and you see two unblocked guys. They got one blocker and two unblocked guys, and man, we got to win those battles. When the math's on your side, you got to win. And then 75-yard run, I mean, you just want to vomit when you see it. It doesn't get any easier to watch. And there's a number of different, we can't run around blocks. And we got to find a way to knock it down. One of the things we've talked about a lot, the guys have done a real nice job of knocking things down so things don't turn to fatals. And then in some cases too, I guess maybe unfortunately, is some of these lessons they don't quite hurt enough to change some behaviors until it happens in a game. And so we need to make sure that we learn from those and make sure moving forward that we recognize what the job descriptor pertains to, whether it's a gap or leveraging on the perimeter or chasing a guy down with effort. There's a reason we came up with that job. That wasn't going to help us. We wouldn't have asked you to do it, that thing. So no, it is alarming. It is alarming. But you also, new opponent, new challenge, and we don't get credit for the good stuff we did, and then we don't get smacked in the face again by the next opponent just because it happened last weekend. So, but we got to get it corrected. There's no doubt.
Aside from Dylan Edwards, obviously breaking some big runs, Avery Johnson had some big runs as well, and not going against the Kansas team with a very mobile quarterback in Jalen Daniels. How do you plan to contain him and work on keeping the QB in the pocket?
Yeah, and that's just it. Is one, you can have a plan for it. The second thing is they get a vote in terms of how they react to some of the things that we're doing, and then sometimes it ends up being just from an athletic standpoint a positive for an individual player with some unique or elite traits, and that's it's been a long time. The advent of athletic quarterbacks, so it's not unique, it's not rare. Some guys obviously certainly are better than others and have a knack for it and some of those things. So it's going to be a challenge. Last week we failed. Major challenge this week. And again, it's one thing if you say, well, all he can do is run. It changes your kind of mentality a little bit when he can also airmail that thing down the field, and so you're not going to have extras, and that's why offenses have a tendency, and these offensive coaches have a tendency to try to recruit or draft athletic quarterbacks for a reason, because it just gets the math completely skewed against you defensively. So plan is just that. We've got to do a better job of rush lanes. We've got to respect that. We have to understand that we're not the only guy in the field. When you're out of rush lanes or you lose leverage on the perimeter, then you do become the only guy on the field, or you just created that scenario for somebody else. And so you can try to simulate it. It's very difficult to do so, and so this will be a massive challenge this week. And he's been tearing up people for a long time in this conference.
UCF cuts it to 10-7, and then Kansas State bounces back pretty quickly. What was most frustrating about seeing how that drive took place?
Yeah, and that's the thing is you gotta, the complementary football, and it's a nice tagline, and it comes in waves and different phases, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily announce itself. Other times, like you're mentioning, like one of those moments, okay, let's settle in and find a way to get a stop, or better yet, let's go get a takeaway, and let's try to get some momentum and put ourselves in a situation where we get the ball back to the offense. And when you fail in those moments, again, it's just that momentum piece that can be damning. And then my argument against that is, okay, so what if it goes 14-10? Is there anything that would suggest we're immune to being down 14-10, or even if it ends up being 21-10? Okay, now we get a stop. You can't be a revisionist in the moment. That happened. We got to move on, and we got to find a way to get the next one. So they're certainly critical, but it is something too that we had to kind of I guess set our jaw much sooner than that's the most concerning thing to me in that moment, was not just a singular drive, because I agree with you. Okay, here we go. Let's find a stop and kind of put the crowd maybe at a sense of panic, and then maybe that's a trickle-down effect to the opponent. When those moments don't happen and you miss them, it makes it very difficult, and it just immediately gets flipped back the other way. But again, I can't emphasize it enough that was one moment. You lose that one, you got to find a way to win the next one. And again, that's the concerning part when it starts stacking against you.
Coach, your defense was able to attack early, pounce early with the 2 turnovers in those first 2 drives. Of course, Kansas State was able to get some momentum after that, though. But given that early momentum, how can you maybe be able to sustain that attack mindset throughout longer, especially considering your unit was on the field for so long?
Well, and that's just it. In some games, it goes that way. And, you see that first quarter, and it was a back and forth. Again, not necessarily points-wise, but just a both teams slugging it out, and sometimes that includes longer drives on our part. Sometimes it include longer drives on their part, and you find a way to keep them out of the end zone and make them count in threes, or find a way to get a takeaway. And you also got to embrace those moments as part of the expectation that it's okay to be taking some punches and then delivering yours, and it's okay to be on the drive. Okay, we're back up, let's go. Right? We decided to play football to actually play. It's one thing from a fan perspective to say, okay, the offense went 3 and out. When you're in the arena, that's you're a defensive football player. If it frustrates you to have to take the field type of thing, then probably didn't sign up for the right sport or position. So you got to embrace that, and it can be frustrating when you feel like you're taking on water maybe a little bit, but that's also the decision that you make in that moment, whether or not that's your mentality or response as it's kind of being almost what ends up being a stalemate after that first quarter. And we just didn't handle that very well, and it's the first time probably that we were in that scenario this year. But we're one of the messages is, my hope would be at the end of the first quarter every week that we can look at the scoreboard and we're somehow, even to in a possession on one side of it. That's the game, that's the sport, and we got to make sure that it doesn't initiate some type of panic response in us, and maybe we felt that a little bit.
Coach, you talked on Jalen Daniel and how to contain him, but also Kansas has a lot of wide receivers that are offensive threats. I want to talk about that air game. Talked about the rushing game being a little lackluster last weekend, but how do you attack Kansas wide receivers?
Yeah, and then the easy answer, you got to keep them obviously in front of it. You got to make sure that when they direct the ball downfield, that you're positioned top down, that you can say 50-50 ball. It's not always necessarily that case, but you got to win your share. You have to make sure that with all they do offensively, that you're not just giving them free targets. Where there's a play fake in the backfield and some specifically off of play action, the quarterback turns around and there's someone running down the field scot-free. I mean, you can't give them. It's hard enough to play defense without just handing the team points or yards specifically through the air. And so you see speed on film, and so it's the fatal deal, man. That catch can turn into an explosive very quickly. So you got to be disciplined that way. It also speaks to, okay, well, how many eyes can you have on the quarterback if you're supposed to, be on top and making plays on the back end as well. So it's why they're good at what they do. That's why their stats are what they are. And our antennas are up, believe me. And it's hard to simulate. You go through practice with scouting, our guys give us a great look, and they're working their tails off. But what you need them to do is run 40-yard dashes every single play to really simulate. And the answer is you can't. And again, at the same token, you need a scout team quarterback running a 40-yard dash every single play too to simulate that piece. So, man, it's a real one this week, and but it's also what you sign up for. It's an exciting challenge for us, and one we gotta swing back at.
How would you evaluate your secondary after 4 games, and also how they were able to absorb the loss this past week of not having DJ Bell and not having Jaden Williams?
Yeah, and that's one of those things that over the course of the season that's going to happen, and guys got to respond to whatever roles they're given. It's also for some guys that just makes their rep count go up, especially if there's a drop off in terms of the depth behind it. So part of the messaging for the guys that we're not able to put in the game is like we got to prepare and practice better, so we have the confidence to get you in, so that we can absorb some of that. But I think certainly from a body on body standpoint, it would be plus at this moment. You watch it and you're like, okay, we're in a position that if the ball was directed downfield, we can make some plays. And in a couple instances where there's a simulated pressure, like a zone blitz or something like that, and they guess right on an RPO, that's more call than kid. And so you got to make sure that you're not forcing calls from a coordinator standpoint, which sometimes if you're not getting pressure and some of those things you have a tendency to do. This call will create a play, and inevitably history tells me that a lot of times it goes the other way against you, type of thing. So short of that, I thought they did a pretty nice job. And again, I keep highlighting we got to be knockdown artists on the back end, and we missed some opportunities to do that this past week, both in the run game and in the pass game. They catch it in front of us. We tell the guys catches don't beat you; it's catches and runs and obviously the home runs that ultimately get you.
Alex Scott said yesterday that he thought the defense was on the field way too much in the early parts of the game. He wanted to get you guys off and get you guys some rest. Were you pleased with the rotation that you guys have been able to have to maybe help get some guys a blow here or there when it's needed?
Yeah, I think at some spots the answer would be yes. At other spots, been disappointed. And maybe disappointed in us as coaches, not just specific players, but what are we lacking from a coaching standpoint that we don't have the confidence to take a guy out and give him a spell and some of those things. And I'm talking about me, not the other defensive coaches. And then the trickle down effect is players got to take accountability for that and those things too, is making sure that what they're doing over the course of the work week gives us the confidence that we can put them in the game. And so I think that's something we got to continue to analyze and sometimes too is the security blanket of certain guys being out there. After the cumulative impact of play after play after play, maybe we're not getting the best version of them because we're allowing them to play too much. Just the reality of it. So that's something we got to constantly analyze. I think also too the messaging defensively. And I appreciate Coach saying that. The messaging to us is we got to get stopped. We're part of that being on the field too long. There's some opportunities in third downs and fourth downs. You go back and look at that thing. Like, come on now. Like we got some good opportunities to get stops. And again, credit to the opponent that we didn't, but we gotta own our piece of that too.
A few more. Coach Frost didn't complain about some of the physicality on the line between possible holds, but he said he'd gain further clarity on what may or may not be called for future games. Does that kind of change the way you guys practice to prepare for that kind of physicality on the line?
Yeah, we never talk about holding defensively, and you just can't, and that's the responsibility of the head football coach, and he does that. But from a specific teaching standpoint and everything else is, the more violent you are, the harder it is for somebody to hold you. That's the reality of it. And so we don't, if that shoot, even when the flag gets thrown for holding, we're still coaching the guys as to how we can get off blocks and do some of those things. So we're not in the business of giving the guys the out if someone grabs them type of thing, again, but as it pertains to how we coach them.
What goes through your mind when you see Taven Jackson come back into the game?
Well, you're so in your bubble, and awkwardly so, and I don't say that the doubting coach, literally awkwardly so. Like I didn't even know he went back in until probably, I didn't know how long he was in when I noticed it, So, but no, it's a shot in the arm, and he's played good football for us. I think the guys believe in him. Those are things over the course of the season too that on that same note is we got to make sure that we're not wrapped up in maybe to a fault. I'm not aware of it, but if the guys are too aware of what's going on the other side of the ball, whether it's personnel or how things are going and stuff like that, again, we can't have a fan reaction as we go through this thing. We got to think about the next series, getting the coaching point from the previous one, and then do the best job we possibly can to let it rip when we get back out there. But certainly I think he's one of those guys it's on the practice field, and there's a talent there, and good to see him out there.
It shows a commitment, though, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
To the rest of his teammates.
Goodness gracious! I mean, it's a message, man. You're gonna have some things. You're gonna feel certain ways, and there's every reason at certain times. There's every reason to shut it down, whether it's a scoreboard, whether you're banged up, and all those things, the combination thereof, and no one would fault you if you said, today's not my day or something, not even just specific to him, but using him as an example. And that's available to you. And then some guys, just from a competitive standpoint, just they don't know that thought process, and so I think you're absolutely right from a messaging standpoint. Kind of gets me fired up thinking about it.
Last one of it.
Coach, now that we're on to week 6, what's the biggest difference you've seen in this team since the start? How has this unit evolved now that we're a conference play?
Yeah, I think obviously still a work in progress as you're going through it. Unique season with a Thursday game and an early bye week and some of those things. So you're going into you're a quarter away through a third away through the season. And, like, goodness gracious, it's going quick, and that's kind of an eye opener maybe from a coaching standpoint. And so as you evolve, I think part of it is, you don't have the shared experiences until you really get on the field. You try to show them everything you possibly can in every situation that you possibly can over the course of the off season, and that it's just not real until you play games, and that's as scary as it gets from a coaching standpoint. So I think you're seeing a practice today look like a team that's been practicing on a Tuesday for the 5th time, like preparing for an opponent on a Tuesday, as opposed to it didn't look like a spring ball practice where it just you get some work in and you get the coach corrects you and everything else. It looked like guys preparing to play an opponent. I mean that's part of that evolution as you go through the year. And then at this point, I don't make the claim we've seen everything through the first 4 games and every situation and all of that, but you gotta build through some of these things. We faced some adversity. This was our first Sunday after a loss. Coaches, how do we handle it? Players, how do we handle it? We firing excuses at each other, or we blaming each other, or we're going to respond and do some of those things. So that's part of it. It's the bad part of it, but it's also required, and 50% of the teams every week are in that position, and so we got to make sure we got maturity about us and learn from it, and you either believe in adversity or you don't. And again, we're finding out if we're going to be that type of group that can battle through it. So we'll continue to go through the work week and fight like all hell on Saturday.
All right. Thanks, Coach.
All right, thank you all.
You gonna stay up?